The Greyhound bus pulled up at the gas station on the outskirts of Fairview. At exactly 3:47 p.m., Laura Connor clutched a worn sports bag in her hands. All her possessions fit into one bag. 6 years, 2 months, and 19 days. That was how long it had been since she had last set foot on this land. The October air in Ohio was crisp and clean, nothing like the stale atmosphere of the prison corridors. Laura took a deep breath, trying to believe that this was really happening. In her jeans pocket was $247, money she had earned in the prison laundry, and the address of the parole office. Fairview hadn't changed much. The same storefronts lined Main Street, the same rusty water tower with the faded name of the town. Only now, half the stores were boarded up, and a new bank with shiny glass windows had gone up on the corner. Laura walked slowly, each step a struggle. People looked at her curiously. In a small town, everyone knows everyone else, and her absence had certainly not gone unnoticed. Old Mrs. Cooper from the flower shop quickly turned away when she caught her eye. Her first stop was the probation office in the basement of the courthouse. Gerald Fisher, the probation officer, was a heavy-set man in his 50s with tired eyes. He handed Laura a stack of papers without looking up. Weekly reports on Wednesdays by 5 p.m. No alcohol, no drugs, no contact with other convicts. Find a job within 30 days, or we'll have to talk about violating the terms of your probation, he said monotonously, as if reading from a card. Understood, Laura replied. Her voice sounded hoarse after the long silence on the bus. Do you have a place to stay? Laura hesitated. The house on Elm Street where she had lived with David and little Emma was no longer hers. The bank had taken it 2 years ago for non-payment of the mortgage. I'll find somewhere, she said. Fisher finally looked up. Something like sympathy flashed in his eyes. The Pines Motel rents rooms by the week. It's cheap. Tell Dolores it's from me. The Pines Motel was located next to the highway, 2 miles from downtown. Dolores, a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, gave Laura a once-over. $75 a week, 75 deposit, no parties, no guests after 10, she said, handing her the key to room 12. The room was small and gloomy. There was a bed with a sagging mattress, a pressed cardboard table, and a TV with a cracked screen. But it was her space, and no one could tell her when to turn the lights on or off. The next day, Laura went looking for a job. At McDonald's, they looked at her suspiciously when they found out about her criminal record. At Harris's grocery store, the manager wouldn't even let her fill out an application. I'm sorry, but we need people with a clean record, he said without looking up from his papers. By the end of the day, Laura was almost desperate when she saw a sign in the window of Benny's auto repair. Mechanic wanted, experience preferred. Benny Rotello was a second-generation Italian, a sturdy man in his 50s with hands covered in old scars from working with metal. His workshop smelled of machine oil and welding. Can you fix cars? He asked bluntly. I studied until before everything happened. My father was a mechanic. Benny nodded. I don't care what happened before. I care if you can work. $10 an hour cash. If you work well, we'll raise you to 12 in a month. For the first time in 2 days, Laura felt relieved. When do I start? Tomorrow at 7 in the morning. That evening, sitting in her gloomy motel room, Laura took a worn photograph out of her bag. It was a picture of 6-year-old Emma in a pink dress, with 2 pigtails and a toothless smile. The photo had been taken a week before the arrest, the last time they had been truly together. Emma was 12 now. She was in high school at Fairview and lived in a house on Oak Street with... Laura couldn't bring herself to say those names out loud, even in her own thoughts. The next day, during her lunch break, she drove to the school. Children were running out into the schoolyard, laughing and jostling each other. Laura stood across the street, gripping the steering wheel of Benny's old pickup truck, which he had let her borrow, and then she saw her. Emma was walking with a group of girls, chatting and gesturing. She was taller than Laura had expected, with long brown hair, just like Laura had at that age. But in the girl's face, Laura recognized David's features, the same stubborn chin, the same green eyes. Suddenly, Emma looked up and stared straight at her. For a moment, their eyes met across the street. Laura felt her heart stop. Had her daughter recognized her? But Emma simply turned away and continued talking to her friends as if nothing had happened. Laura realized with painful clarity that to Emma, she was just a stranger in an old pickup truck. That night, Laura lay awake, staring at the ceiling with its water stains. Tomorrow, she would go to a law office to find out about her parental rights. The day after tomorrow, she might work up the courage to go to the house on Oak Street. But first, she had to decide if she was ready for what she might find there. 2 weeks had passed since her release. Laura was getting used to the rhythm of work at the auto repair shop. Her hands were regaining their confidence with the tools. Her muscle memory was returning. Benny turned out to be a fair employer who didn't ask unnecessary questions and paid what he promised. That Thursday, she was working under the hood of an old Chevrolet when she heard a familiar voice at the front desk. "Hi, Benny. I need an oil change on my Honda." Laura froze. David's voice hadn't changed. Same low tone, same casual confidence. She peeked out from under the hood and saw him. David Connor still looked good. At 38, he had retained his athletic build, although his hair was noticeably thinner and wrinkles had appeared around his eyes. He was wearing a clean work shirt with the D&K construction logo. Apparently, he was still in the construction business. "Sure, leave the keys. You can pick them up after 5, Benny replied, not looking at Laura. David turned toward the exit and stopped dead in his tracks. Their eyes met across the garage. His face reflected shock, then something like guilt, then caution. "Laura," he said quietly. "David." An awkward pause ensued. Benny discreetly disappeared into the utility room. "I heard that you were released," David began, moving closer. "How are you?" Laura wiped her hands on a rag. "I'm alive. Working. How about you?" "Working too. Business is good." He shifted nervously from foot to foot. "Listen, we need to talk. Seriously. About what? About Emma. About what happened. About what's happening now." Laura felt her stomach tighten. "What about Emma?" She's happy, Laura. She has a family, stability. Casey loves her very much." The name of her younger sister sounded like a slap in the face. Laura slowly put down her tools. "Casey," she repeated. "My sister Casey, who promised to look after Emma while I was in prison." "It's not that simple." "No, David. It is that simple." Laura's voice grew firmer. "I went to prison for your crime. You promised you'd take care of our daughter. Instead, you married my sister." David glanced around to make sure Benny couldn't hear them. "Not here. Let's meet tonight, in the park by the pond, at 8. I'll explain everything." Laura wanted to refuse, but she needed answers. Okay, that evening, Laura arrived at the city park 15 minutes before the appointed time. The place was deserted. Only an old swing creaked in the wind. She and David had often walked here when they first started dating. It was here that he had proposed to her 12 years ago. David arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, carrying 2 cups of coffee from Dunkin' Donuts. "Just like old times," he said, handing her a cup. "No," Laura replied sharply. "Tell me." David sat down on the bench next to her, but at a respectful distance. "After you were arrested, everything fell apart very quickly. The bank took the house. I could barely pay the lawyer. Emma was in shock. She didn't understand where her mother was." "I remember," Laura said dryly. "I was there." Casey helped with Emma. She picked her up from school, fed her, put her to bed. She was the only one who didn't turn her back on us after what happened. Laura remembered exactly what had happened. The construction company where David worked had been awarded a large municipal contract to renovate a school. David was the foreman on the site and was responsible for purchasing materials. The temptation proved too great. He began inflating estimates and stealing the difference. In 6 months, he had accumulated almost $60,000. When the auditors started checking, David panicked. He transferred the stolen money to a bank account in Laura's name and convinced her that it was temporary, that he would pay it all back. Laura believed him, as she always believed her husband. When the truth came out, David swore he would take all the blame. But he had a criminal record for a bar fight 10 years ago. Under the 3 strikes law, he was facing 15 to 25 years. If you take the blame, you'll get a maximum of 7 years, he told Laura. You have a clean record and a good lawyer, and Emma needs at least one parent who's free, Laura agreed. She thought she was saving a family. Casey came to see me every weekend for the first 2 years, David continued. She told me how Emma was doing and brought photos. And then you married her. Laura, I was alone with a child. Casey was there. Emma was attached to her. It just happened. When? 2 years ago. So they got married when Laura was in her 4th year of prison, just when Casey's visits stopped and the letters became fewer and fewer. Does Emma know the truth? Does she know who her real mother is? David hesitated. She knows she had a mother who left. We didn't want to traumatize her with the details. Traumatize her with the details, Laura repeated slowly. So she doesn't know I'm alive? That I'm back? Laura, she's 12 years old. She thinks Casey is her mother. That's the truth to her. Laura stood up and walked over to the pond. The city lights reflected in the dark water. For 6 years, she had imagined this moment, meeting her daughter, hugging her, tears of joy. In her fantasies, Emma was waiting for her to return. I want to see her, she said without turning around. Laura, I want to see my daughter David. She has a right to know who I am. It will only upset everyone. Emma is happy. She has a family. Laura turned abruptly. She has a mother. I am her mother. I spent 6 years in prison so she could have a father who was free, and you stole her from me just like you stole that money. I didn't steal. Don't lie to me anymore. Laura's voice trembled with rage. Don't you dare lie to me anymore. I know you're still stealing. I saw your new pickup truck. I saw your expensive clothes. Where did you get the money, David? Are you stealing from your clients again? David turned pale. How did you... It doesn't matter how. What matters is that you haven't changed. And now you're putting Casey in danger just like you put me in danger. It's not like that. That's exactly what it is. And I won't let you ruin another life. Laura headed for the park exit. David caught up with her at the gate. What are you going to do? Take back what's mine. If you try to take Emma away... Laura stopped and stared at him. Have you forgotten, David? I've already lost everything. I have nothing left to lose. The next day, Laura went to the library. The Fairview Public Library was a small brick building in the center of town, built in the 1930s. Inside, it smelled of old books and polish. Casey was sitting at the reference desk. Her younger sister had changed. At 29, she looked older than her age, her hair pulled back in a strict bun, thin-rimmed glasses on her face. She was dressed conservatively, as befitted a small-town librarian, but Laura saw in her the same fragile girl who had cried when their mother died. Casey looked up from her computer and froze. The color drained from her face. Hi, Casey, Laura said calmly. Laura. Her sister's voice trembled. I didn't know you got out? 3 weeks ago. Casey glanced around to see if there were any visitors in the library. Only an old man with a newspaper was sitting in the reading room. We need to talk, Casey said quietly. Yes, we do. Casey asked a colleague to cover for her and led Laura into a small office behind the counter. They sat down across from each other at a narrow table covered with index cards. How are you? Casey began. Alive, Laura replied curtly. And you? How's Mrs. Connor? Casey flinched. Laura, I know what you think of me. I think you betrayed me. I think you stole my family while I was rotting in prison. That's not true. It wasn't like that. Then explain it to me. Casey took off her glasses and rubbed her nose. After you were arrested, David was completely lost. Emma cried every night asking when her mommy was coming home. Someone had to take care of her. You promised to look after her. You promised not to marry my husband. We didn't plan for it to happen. Casey looked up at her, her eyes filled with tears. It just happened. We were lonely. We were hurting. Emma needed stability. Stability, Laura said bitterly. What does she know about me? We told her her mom died when she was little. The words hit her like a physical blow. Laura felt the room begin to spin. Died, she repeated silently. Laura, you have to understand, we had to tell her something. She was so young. So I'm dead to her. Laura, to my own daughter, I'm dead. Laura stood up, feeling nauseous. For 6 years, I thought about her every day. I fell asleep every night with her picture. And she thinks I'm dead. We wanted to protect her. From whom? From her own mother? Casey stood up too. From the truth, from the fact that her mother is a criminal who stole money. Silence hung between them like a taut string. I didn't steal the money, Laura said quietly. What? I said I didn't steal the money. David stole the money. I took the blame so he wouldn't get 20 years in prison. Casey stood with her mouth open. But in court you admitted... I sacrificed myself for my family, for my husband, for my daughter. Laura took a step closer. And my husband and my sister took advantage of that sacrifice to build a new family on the ruins of the old one. Laura, I didn't know. That's not true. You knew. Deep down, you always knew David was guilty. But it was easier to believe the lie. Casey sank back into her chair. What are you going to do? I'm going to tell Emma the truth. She has a right to know who her real mother is. You'll ruin her life. No, Laura said, heading for the door. You and David ruined her life. I'm going to fix it. Laura spent a sleepless night thinking about her strategy. In the morning, she called the law office of Stephen Murphy, the only lawyer in town who specialized in family law. Murphy was a short man in his 60s with a gray beard and piercing eyes. His office was on the second floor of an old bank building, and the windows looked out onto Fairview's main street. Your case is quite complicated, Mrs. Connor, he said after reviewing the documents Laura had brought him. Formally, you were never deprived of your parental rights. But in fact, the child has lived with her father and his new wife for 6 years. What does that mean? It means that the court will consider the interests of the child first and foremost. If Emma is attached to her current family and doesn't want to change, but she doesn't know the truth. She was told I was dead. Murphy frowned. That changes things. The child has a right to know her biological parents, but the process can be painful for everyone. How much will it cost? $5,000 up front. If it drags out, it could be more. Laura only had $800, her savings from a month working for Benny. What if I find evidence that David is committing crimes now? Murphy looked at her intently. What kind of evidence? Laura told him about her suspicions, the new expensive pickup truck, the expensive clothes, the new house, even though the construction business in the area was struggling. If you can prove that Mr. Connor is committing fraud, it will have a serious impact on the custody case, the lawyer agreed, but the evidence must be irrefutable. That same day after work, Laura drove to the house on Oak Street where her family now lived. The house was modest but well kept, with white walls, a red tile roof, and a small garden in front of the porch. A late-model blue Ford F-150 pickup truck, worth at least $40,000, was parked in the driveway. Laura parked across the street and waited. At 3:30, the school bus arrived. Emma got out with a boy of about 14, tall, thin, with red hair. See you tomorrow, Jake, Emma said, waving to him. The boy blushed and hurried in the opposite direction. Laura smiled involuntarily. Her daughter already had admirers. Emma walked to the door and took out her keys. She had grown into a beautiful girl. Long brown hair, delicate features that Laura recognized as her own at that age. But there was a confidence in Emma's movements that Laura herself had not had at 12. The girl knew she was loved, that she had a home. Suddenly, Emma stopped and looked back. Their eyes met again across the street. This time, the girl didn't look away right away. She stared at Laura curiously, as if trying to remember something. Laura got out of the car and slowly crossed the street. Her heart was beating so loudly that it seemed to be heard throughout the entire street. "Hello?" she said, stopping at the gate. "Hello," Emma replied. "Who are you?" Laura swallowed. "My name is Laura. I knew your family a long time ago. Before my mom died?" The words hit her like a physical blow. Laura nodded, not trusting her voice. "What was her name? My real mom?" Emma asked with childlike innocence. "Laura," she replied quietly. "Her name was Laura too, just like you. Is that a coincidence?" "Yes," Laura lied. "Coincidence." Emma smiled, the same smile Laura remembered from when she was 6 years old. "Would you like to come in? Aunt Casey isn't home from work yet, but Dad should be here soon." "Aunt Casey?" "Yes, my stepmother. But I call her Aunt Casey because she was my real mother's sister." Laura felt dizzy. So they weren't hiding their relationship, but they had distorted its essence. "Maybe another time," she said. "I have to go." "Okay, will you come back?" "Yes," Laura replied. "I'll definitely come back." That night, Laura couldn't sleep. She lay in her shabby motel room thinking about her daughter. Emma was a happy, confident girl. She had a family, friends, stability. Did Laura have the right to destroy that for her own need for justice? But then she remembered Emma's words about her real mother and realized that the girl had a right to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next day, Laura decided to take action. She knew that David usually had lunch at Molly's Cafe on Main Street, always at the same time, always at the same table. Old habits die hard. Laura arrived at the cafe at 12:30 and sat down at a table in the corner, from where she could see the whole room. David appeared at exactly 1 o'clock, but he wasn't alone. With him was a man of about 50 in an expensive suit, clearly not a local. They sat down at a table in the corner and began to talk quietly, leaning over a folder of documents. Laura couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see David showing the stranger some drawings, and the man shaking his head and pointing to numbers in the documents. Half an hour later, the meeting ended. The man left, leaving the folder with David. David sat for a few more minutes, studying the papers, then made several phone calls. Laura followed him to the D&K construction office, located in a small building on the edge of an industrial area. She parked nearby and began to watch. At the end of the workday, a familiar figure appeared outside the office. Casey pulled up in her small Honda. She entered the building and soon emerged with David. They stood next to his pickup truck and argued about something. Their body language indicated that the conversation was tense. Suddenly, Casey turned and walked toward her car. David caught up with her and grabbed her arm. She broke free and said something sharply to him. Then she got into her car and drove away. David remained standing alone, with a grim expression on his face. The next day, Saturday, Laura decided to take a desperate step. She knew that David played golf at a country club on Saturdays, another expensive habit for a man whose business was supposedly barely making ends meet. Laura drove to the house on Oak Street. David wasn't there. His pickup truck was gone, but Casey was home. Her Honda was in the driveway. Laura knocked on the door. Casey opened it, dressed in her house clothes, her hair tousled and her eyes red. "What are you doing here?" she asked hoarsely. "I need to talk to Emma." "Emma's not home. She's at a friend's birthday party." Laura noticed that Casey's hands were shaking. "Casey, what's going on? You look terrible." Casey hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." The house was cozy and clean. Family photos hung on the walls, David, Casey, and Emma at various events. A happy family. It was as if Laura had never existed. "Coffee?" Casey offered. "Thanks." They went into the kitchen. Casey put the coffee on and sat down at the table across from Laura. "Does David know you've been here?" "No, and it's better if he doesn't." "Why?" Casey was silent for a long time, twisting a napkin in her hands. Finally, she looked up. "Laura, I have to tell you something about what's going on." "I'm listening." "David, he's stealing again. A lot. Much more than 6 years ago." Laura felt her stomach tighten. "Tell me." "He has a contract to build a shopping center in the next county. A big contract worth $2 million. He's inflating expenses, buying cheap materials instead of expensive ones, forging supplier documents." "How do you know?" "He made me sign documents as a partner in the firm. He said it was for tax purposes. Now I realize that if everything comes out, not only will he be to blame, but I will be too." Laura leaned back in her chair. "He's setting you up just like he set me up." "Yes." Casey wiped away her tears. "Laura, I was a fool. I thought I loved him. I thought he had changed. But he was just looking for a new victim." "How much money did he steal?" "I don't know exactly, but he bought a new car. He talks about plans for a big house, expensive vacations. I think we're talking hundreds of thousands. Do you have any proof? Casey nodded. Documents. I started copying everything he gave me to sign. I hid them in a safe deposit box. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm scared. Casey's voice trembled. Yesterday I tried to talk to him, told him I wanted out of the business. He threatened me. He said if I tried to turn him in, I'd be sorry. And he said Emma could get hurt. Laura stood up abruptly. He threatened Emma? Not directly, but the implication was clear. Casey, you need to go to the police. And what would I say? That I signed the papers without reading them? That I'm an accomplice to fraud? They'll put me in jail, and Emma will be left with him. Laura paced around the kitchen, thinking about the situation. Do you have a plan? I thought about running away. Taking Emma and going somewhere far away. That's kidnapping. You'll get even more time for that. Then what do we do? Laura stopped and looked at her sister. At that moment, Casey didn't look like a rival, but like another victim of David. We can work together, she said slowly. What do you mean? You give me the documents. I'll take them to Sheriff Brown. David will be arrested and we'll both be free of him. What about Emma? Emma will learn the truth about who her real mother is, about who her father really is. Casey was silent for a long time. She'll hate me for lying. Maybe, but it's better for her to know the truth and hate me than to live a lie and love me. What if she chooses to stay with me, despite everything? Laura felt a twinge of pain. Then I'll accept her choice, but it will be her choice, based on the truth. Casey nodded. Okay, I'll bring the papers tomorrow morning, but there's one problem. What is it? David is getting suspicious. He checked my phone yesterday and asked who I was seeing. I'm afraid he might suspect something. Then we need to act fast. At that moment, they heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. He's back, Casey whispered, turning pale. Laura went to the window. David's blue pickup truck was turning toward the house. The back door? There. Laura hurried to the back door of the kitchen. Tomorrow at noon at the library. Bring all the documents. Okay. Laura slipped out through the backyard just as the front door slammed shut. She heard David's voice. Casey, why is the coffee maker on? Who were you meeting? Casey's answer was indistinct, but her tone made it clear she was nervous. Laura hurried to her car, parked on the next street. A plan was forming in her head. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the truth would finally come out. But she didn't know that David had been watching her for a long time, and that he was willing to do anything to protect his secrets. That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay next to Casey, who was pretending to be asleep, and thought about the situation. Laura's appearance had changed everything. She was too smart, too stubborn, and she had serious motives for revenge. He got up and went to his home office. He opened the safe hidden behind a painting and took out the Glock 19 pistol he had bought for self-defense. He checked the magazine. It was full. David never thought it would come to this. But Laura was a threat not only to him, but to the entire life he had built. To Emma, to Casey, to their future. Sometimes, to protect your family, you have to make tough decisions. Sunday morning in Fairview was foggy and cold. Laura woke up in her motel room with a heavy feeling. Today, everything was supposed to change. Casey would give her the documents, they would go to the sheriff, and the truth would finally come out. At 11:30, Laura arrived at the library. Casey was already waiting for her on the steps, nervously clutching a brown envelope in her hands. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, disheveled hair, trembling hands. Do you have the documents? Laura asked, stepping closer. Casey nodded and handed her the envelope. It's all here. Fake invoices, inflated estimates, documents about fictitious suppliers. This is enough to put him away for years. Laura took the envelope. It was heavy with all the papers inside. How's David? Does he suspect anything? I don't know. He left early this morning, said he was going to a job site, but he was acting strange, looking at me suspiciously the whole time. And Emma? She's at a friend's house. She won't be back until tonight. Laura felt relieved. Whatever happened today, her daughter would be safe. Let's go to the sheriff's office, she said. But when they got to the county courthouse, they found out that Sheriff Brown had been called out and wouldn't be back until tomorrow morning. The officer on duty, a young cop named Reeves, didn't seem particularly interested in their story. Construction fraud? That's a serious accusation. You need to file a formal complaint with a lawyer. Better yet, wait for Sheriff Brown. Laura and Casey left the building disappointed. What now? Casey asked. Let's go to my lawyer. Murphy will be able to file a proper complaint. But Murphy's office was closed. It was Sunday. A note hung on the door. Back Monday at 9 a.m. So we'll wait until tomorrow, said Laura. What if David suspects something before then? Then we'll improvise. They parted ways at the library. Casey drove home, and Laura went to her motel. She hid the envelope with the documents in the only safe place she knew, under the mattress in her shabby room. At 6:30 in the evening, Laura received a message from an unknown number. We need to meet. Urgent. The old mill at 8 p.m. Come alone. K. Laura frowned. Did Casey know her phone number? And why meet at the old mill, an abandoned building on the outskirts of town where they used to play as children? Another message. David found out something. I'm scared. Please come. Laura hesitated. Something was wrong. Casey never wrote so briefly and nervously. But if she was really in danger... At 7:30, Laura got into her old Honda and drove to the mill. Autumn twilight was falling on Fairview, and the streetlights were just coming on. The old Harrison Mill had been in operation until the 1970s, then abandoned. Now it was a dreary brick building with broken windows and a sagging roof, surrounded by weeds. The perfect place for a secret meeting, or an ambush. Laura parked at the entrance and cautiously entered. Her footsteps echoed hollowly in the empty room. The old mill machinery was covered in rust, and the floor was littered with broken glass and trash. "Casey?" she called. There was no answer. Laura walked deeper into the building, to the place where she and her sister used to set up secret headquarters as children. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw not Casey, but David. He was standing in the doorway, blocking the only way out. He had a gun in his hand. "Hi, Laura," he said calmly. "Where's Casey?" "At home, making dinner for Emma." "You wrote those messages?" "I had her phone. It's amazing how easy it is to fake someone's writing style if you know them well enough." Laura slowly backed away, gauging the distance to the windows. They were all too high, and the glass was unevenly broken. You could cut yourself. "What do you want, David?" "The documents Casey gave you. I know she copied them." "I don't know what you're talking about." David smirked. "Don't pretend. You think I didn't notice her rummaging through my papers? How she started asking awkward questions. And then you showed up in town, and suddenly my wife started acting like a conspirator." "Your wife? She's my sister, David. And I've known her longer than you have." "You did. That's in the past. 6 years is a long time. People change." Laura continued to back away slowly. "Yes, they do. You, for example, have become a murderer. I haven't killed anyone yet, but I'm willing to start if it will protect my family." "Your family? You stole my family." "I saved your family," David exploded. "While you were in prison feeling sorry for yourself, I raised your daughter. I worked to give her everything she needed. I became her father when her real father was unavailable." "You're her real father, and you sent me to prison for your crimes." "For our crimes. You agreed to take the blame. Because you lied to me. You said it was temporary, that you'd fix everything." "I did fix it. I gave Emma a normal family, stability, love, built on lies." David raised the gun. "Where are the documents, Laura?" "In a safe place. If anything happens to me, they'll go straight to the sheriff." "Don't lie, you're not that smart." At that moment, they heard the sound of a car outside. David tensed, listening. Then there were quick footsteps on the gravel. "Laura! Laura, are you there?" Casey's alarmed voice rang out. David cursed. "How did she find out?" "I left a note," Laura lied. "In case something went wrong." Casey appeared in the doorway and froze when she saw her husband with the gun. "David, what are you doing?" "What I should have done a long time ago," he replied without turning around. "Protecting our family from the one who wants to destroy it." "Put the gun down, please." "You gave her the papers, Casey. You betrayed me." "You betrayed me first. You used me just like you used Laura." Finally, David turned to his wife. "I love you. I love Emma. I'm doing this for us." "Murder isn't the answer." "Then what is?" Prison? Losing everything we've built? Casey slowly entered the room, keeping her hands in plain sight. We can fix this. Return the money, confess everything, get probation. It's too late, I stole too much. They'll give me 20 years, maybe more. Then we'll move, start a new life somewhere else. With what money? And how far can we run from the feds? Laura took advantage of David's distraction with Casey and carefully moved toward the pile of old boards. Among them, she spotted a piece of rebar. Not an ideal weapon, but better than nothing. David, she said, slowly leaning toward the rebar. Think about Emma. What will happen to her if you kill me? Do you think she'll ever find out the truth? Emma will never know that her mother was a criminal who died trying to escape. What mother? Dead or alive? David hesitated. She doesn't need to know you were alive all this time. But I told her, Laura lied. What? Yesterday when we met at the house, I told Emma who I was. Laura saw David's face turn white with rage. You couldn't? I could. And I did. So it's too late to kill me now. The cat's out of the bag. You're lying! Ask Emma when you get home. Ask her if she knows a woman named Laura who came up to her at the house. David turned the gun back on Laura. His hand was shaking with rage. You ruined everything I've built over the years. You ruined everything yourself the day you decided to steal the money. Shut up. David, don't! Casey screamed, lunging forward, but it was too late. David pulled the trigger. There was a loud bang, the echo of which reverberated through the empty mill building, but the bullet hit the ceiling. Casey had managed to push her husband's hand away at the last moment. Laura took advantage of the confusion and grabbed a piece of rebar. David tried to aim again, but Casey was still holding his hand. Let me go, he growled, trying to break free. No, I won't let you become a murderer. They struggled for the gun. Laura ran closer with the piece of rebar in her hand, but couldn't strike without risking hitting Casey. Suddenly, a second shot rang out. Casey screamed and staggered back, clutching her side. Blood seeped through her fingers. Casey! Laura cried. David stood with the smoking gun in his hand, staring at his wife in horror. I didn't mean to. It was an accident. Casey sank to her knees, still clutching her wound. David, what have you done? It wasn't me. You moved and the gun went off. Laura rushed to her sister. The wound was in her side and bleeding heavily, but it wasn't fatal. If she got to a hospital quickly. We need to call an ambulance, she said, reaching for the phone. No! David pointed the gun at her. Don't call anyone. She'll die without medical attention. This was an accident. We can explain everything. How? David paced around the room, clearly trying to come up with a plan. Let's say we were attacked by robbers, that we met here to talk about Emma's upbringing, and we were attacked. That won't work. There are too many loose ends. Then, David paused and looked at Laura with cold determination. Then there can't be any witnesses. He raised the gun again, this time aiming directly at Laura's head. I'm sorry, Laura, but I have no choice. At that moment, Casey, summoning her last ounce of strength, grabbed a rock from the floor and threw it at David. The rock hit him in the head, and he staggered. Laura didn't miss a beat. She hit David's arm with the pipe. The gun flew out of his fingers and landed on the floor. David lunged for the gun, but Laura was faster. She picked up the gun and pointed it at her ex-husband. Don't move, she said, breathing heavily. David slowly raised his hands. Laura, think about what you're doing. If you kill me, what will you tell Emma? The truth. That her father was a criminal who threatened her mother. I didn't threaten her. I was trying to protect my family. By shooting your wife? David looked at Casey, who was lying on the floor, pale from blood loss. It was an accident. Like stealing money 6 years ago? Like stealing it again? I did it for the family. No, Laura said, moving closer to him. You did it for yourself. You've always done everything for yourself. She held the gun with both hands, aiming at David's chest. Her finger was on the trigger. Laura, don't, Casey whispered weakly. Don't be like him. He ruined our lives. He stole my daughter. He made you lie. He set us both up. I know, but murder won't fix any of that. It will bring justice. Laura looked at David through the scope. He stood motionless, but she could see the fear in his eyes. Finally, he spoke. "If you kill me, Emma will have no father. She has a mother, who was in prison for theft. For your theft. The court decided otherwise." Laura felt anger rising in her chest. This man had ruined her life, stolen her daughter, turned her sister into an accomplice, and even now he was trying to manipulate her. She pulled the trigger. The shot rang out in the empty mill building. David clutched his chest and slowly sank to his knees, then fell onto his side. Blood began to spread across the dusty floor. Laura stood over the body, still holding the gun. David Connor was dead. "What have I done?" she whispered. Casey tried to get up. "Laura, we need to call the police." "I know." Laura took out her phone and dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, she said, "I need the police and an ambulance. The old Harrison Mill on River Road. There's someone injured and one dead." "Can you describe the situation?" Laura looked at David's body, at her wounded sister, at the gun in her hand. "There's been a shooting," she said simply. The police arrived at the scene 12 minutes after Laura's call. Sheriff Tom Brown was an experienced officer who had seen a lot in his 20 years on the job, but even he was struck by the complexity of the situation. Laura sat on the floor next to the wounded Casey, pressing her jacket against her sister's wound. The gun lay a few feet away from them. David's body lay against the opposite wall in a pool of blood. "I shot him," Laura said as soon as Brown entered the building. "He threatened us with a gun. He wounded my sister. I acted in self-defense." Brown nodded to the paramedics, who rushed to Casey. She was quickly placed on a stretcher and taken to the hospital. Her condition was critical. She had lost a lot of blood. "Mrs. Connor, you have the right to remain silent," Brown began, handcuffing Laura. "I understand, but I want to tell the truth." At the station, Laura gave a detailed statement. She told them about her release, how she found out about David's marriage to Casey, the documents proving her husband's fraud, and the events at the mill. Detective Sarah Coleman, who had arrived from the county office to investigate the murder, listened intently to every word. "Are you saying that Mr. Connor set you up?" "Yes. He sent me messages from Casey's phone, pretending to be her. We have the victim's phone. We'll check the messages. Also check the documents in my motel room. They prove that David was involved in large-scale fraud." Coleman wrote down the motel address. "Mrs. Connor, do you understand the seriousness of these charges? First-degree murder is punishable by life imprisonment. It was self-defense. He was going to kill us both." "Can your sister confirm that?" "If she survives." Casey did survive. The operation lasted 4 hours. The bullet had damaged her spleen and grazed her intestines, but the surgeons managed to stop the internal bleeding. The first 24 hours were critical, but on the third day she regained consciousness. Laura was in the county jail awaiting trial. She was denied bail. The charges were too serious. Stephen Murphy took her case pro bono, considering it a matter of principle. "We have a strong case," he told Laura during a visit. "Casey has corroborated your version of events. David did threaten you with a gun and injure his wife. Plus, the documents about his fraud confirm a motive for killing witnesses. What about Emma?" Murphy's face darkened. "That's more complicated. Child Services has placed her with foster parents for the time being. Casey is still too weak to take care of her. And you're charged with murder. I want to see her. That's not possible right now. But after the trial, if you're acquitted or given a suspended sentence, what if I'm not acquitted?" Murphy didn't answer. The trial began 2 months later. During that time, a lot changed. Casey recovered and gave detailed testimony to investigators, completely corroborating Laura's version of events. Documents from the motel became the basis for a federal investigation into David's fraud. It turned out that he had stolen more than $500,000. But the most important change was that Emma finally learned the whole truth. Social worker Jennifer Holmes was an experienced woman who specialized in working with children in traumatic situations. She delicately told Emma that her real mother was alive, that she had been in prison for 6 years, and that the man the girl had considered her father had died while trying to kill her mother. Emma's reaction was complex and painful. At first, she was in shock and denial. Then she felt anger toward all the adults who had lied to her for years. Then she grieved for the death of the only father she had ever known, no matter what he was like. "She's a very smart girl," Holmes told Murphy, "but she needs time to process everything. 12 years of her life based on a lie is a lot to deal with." "Does she want to see Laura?" "Not yet. She's angry at everyone, but that's normal. She needs to go through all the stages of grief." The trial attracted attention from across the county. The story of a woman who served 6 years for her husband's crime and then killed him in self-defense and to protect her sister was too dramatic to go unnoticed. Prosecutor James Anderson insisted on a second-degree murder charge. He argued that Laura acted out of revenge, not self-defense. The defendant harbored plans for revenge for 6 years, he told the jury. She returned to town with the sole purpose of destroying the life of the man she believed was responsible for her misfortunes. David Connor may have been a con man, but that did not give her the right to be judge and executioner. Murphy built his defense around self-defense and the protection of third parties. "Laura Connor is a victim, not a criminal," he said. 6 years ago, she sacrificed her freedom to protect her family. David Connor took advantage of that sacrifice to steal her daughter and marry her sister. And when the truth began to come out, he tried to cover his tracks by murdering Laura Connor was defending not only herself, but also her wounded sister. Key witnesses included Casey and Detective Coleman. Casey, still weak from surgery, gave emotional testimony about how David had threatened her family and tried to frame her for new fraud charges. "He said Emma would get hurt if I didn't keep quiet," she testified, crying. "I realized I had become the new victim of his manipulation, just like Laura had been." Detective Coleman presented material evidence, messages from Casey's phone, documents about the fraud, and ballistics results showing that David had indeed fired the first shot. But the most unexpected moment came when Emma appeared in the courtroom. The girl arrived with a social worker on the 3rd day of the trial and sat in the gallery, watching intently. Laura saw her daughter and felt her heart sink. Emma looked older than her 12 years, serious, sad, with deep shadows under her eyes. But she had come. That meant something. During the break, Holmes approached Murphy. "Emma wants to talk to her mother," she said quietly. "Now?" "Yes, but not for long, and with security present." The meeting took place in a small visiting room. Laura and Emma sat on opposite sides of the table, with a security guard standing between them. They were silent for a long time, just looking at each other. Laura saw David's features in her daughter's face, but also her own. The stubborn chin, the curve of the eyebrows, the expression in the eyes. "Why didn't you tell me the truth when we met at the house?" Emma finally asked. "I wanted to, but you were happy. You had a family that loved you. I didn't want to ruin everything." "But you did," Laura nodded. "Yes, and I'm very sorry." "Did you really go to prison for what Dad did?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I thought I was protecting the family. I thought you'd be better off with your father out of prison than with your mother in prison. And now I have no parents at all." The words sounded like an accusation, but Laura could hear the pain in them. "You have your mother," she said quietly. "You have me." "I don't know you. You're a stranger to me. I know, but if you give me a chance, what if you go to prison for killing Dad?" Laura didn't know what to say. "I don't know what will happen, but I want you to know that I love you. I always have. Every day in prison, I thought about you." Emma was silent, staring at the table. Then she looked up. "Did he really try to kill you?" "Yes." "And you killed him to protect Aunt Casey?" "Her and myself." Emma nodded. "Okay, I just wanted to know." The meeting was over. Emma left without saying another word, but something had changed. Laura could feel it. The trial lasted 2 days. The prosecutor insisted that the murder was a premeditated act of revenge. The defense argued that it was legitimate self-defense. The jury deliberated for 18 hours. When they returned to the courtroom, Laura stood up, preparing for the verdict. "On the charge of first-degree murder, not guilty," the foreperson announced. Laura felt relieved, but the tension remained. "On the charge of second-degree murder, not guilty. On the charge of manslaughter, you are found guilty." Manslaughter. That meant 2 to 10 years in prison, but with the possibility of parole under certain circumstances. Judge Margaret Fields was a fair woman who had carefully reviewed all the evidence in the case. When she handed down the sentence, she said, "Laura Connor, you have been found guilty of manslaughter. The court recognizes that you acted in extreme necessity, defending yourself and another person from armed attack. The court also takes into account the fact that you have already served 6 years in prison for a crime you did not commit." She paused, looking at the documents. "I sentence you to 5 years imprisonment, suspended for 3 years. You will remain free, subject to the terms of your probation." The courtroom erupted in applause. Laura was free. 6 months later, Laura was back working for Benny at the auto repair shop. She rented a small apartment in downtown Fairview and met regularly with her probation officer. Casey made a full physical recovery, but the emotional scars took longer to heal. She went to therapy and started a new life. The sisters cautiously rebuilt their relationship. There was too much pain between them to forgive everything at once. "I'm not asking you to forgive me for marrying David," Casey said one day as they drank coffee at Molly's cafe. "But I do ask you to forgive me for believing his lies about you." "We were both victims," Laura replied, "in different ways, but victims nonetheless." What will happen to Emma? That was the hardest question. Emma was spending time between her foster family and Casey, who had been granted temporary custody. She saw Laura once a week, first with a social worker present, then alone. The relationship was slow and painful. Emma was angry, asked difficult questions, and sometimes cried. But she came. Every week she came. "I don't want to live with you," she said bluntly one day. "Not yet. You still seem like a stranger to me." "I understand," Laura replied. "But will you let me be part of your life?" "I guess so. Let's try." It was a start. It wasn't the reunion Laura had dreamed of in prison, but it was a start. A year passed. Laura got a promotion at the auto repair shop. She was now a senior mechanic and earned $15 an hour. Casey returned to her job at the library. Emma was in 7th grade and seeing a psychologist to work through her trauma. The relationship between mother and daughter developed slowly. Emma started staying with Laura on weekends. They cooked together, watched movies, talked about school and friends. The girl gradually got to know her real mother. "Tell me about prison," Emma asked one day. "What exactly do you want to know? How did you live there? What did you think about?" Laura told her honestly, without embellishment. She told her about the fear of the first few months, about the other women she had befriended, about her work in the prison laundry, about the courses she had taken. "Every day I looked at your photo," she said, "and I imagined how we would meet when I got out. In my fantasies, everything was different." "How?" "You ran to me with open arms. You cried with joy. You said you missed me." Emma thought for a moment. Would I have cried if I had known the truth? I don't know. Maybe. I wish I had known. Then we would have had more time. It was a turning point. For the first time, Emma expressed regret for the lost years, rather than anger at the deception. A year and a half after the trial, Emma decided to move in with Laura permanently. It wasn't an emotional reunion, but a conscious choice by a 13-year-old girl who was ready to try to build a relationship with her real mother. "I'm not going to call you Mom right away," she warned. "It'll be weird." "You can call me Laura until you're ready," her mother replied. "What if I'm never ready?" "Then I'll just be Laura, who loves you." Casey accepted Emma's decision with understanding. "Laura is her real mother," she told the social worker. "I was a temporary replacement. A good one, I hope, but temporary." "You're not going to disappear from her life?" Laura asked. "Of course not. I'm her aunt. I'll be there if she needs me." 2 years later, on the 5th anniversary of Laura's release, she and Emma went to the cemetery. David's grave was modest, a simple granite stone with his name and dates. There were no flowers. No one had brought any. "Do you hate him?" Emma asked. Laura thought long and hard about her answer. "No, not now. I understand that he was a weak man who made bad decisions. He caused a lot of pain, but hatred would only cause more pain." "But I hate him," Emma said quietly, "for making you go to prison, for deceiving me, for trying to kill you. That's okay. You need time to process everything. Have you forgiven Aunt Casey? Yes, we were both victims of his manipulation. Emma nodded. Good. I want to forgive her too. They stood at the grave for a few more minutes, then walked to the car. Laura? Emma said as they got in. Yes? I think I'm ready to call you Mom. Laura felt tears welling up in her eyes. Are you sure? Yes, you've earned it. Epilogue. 5 years later, Laura stood at the altar of the Fairview Methodist Church, watching her 18-year-old daughter receive her high school diploma. Emma was valedictorian, captain of the debate team, and had received a scholarship to Ohio State University. Sitting next to Laura was Casey, who had married a history teacher from a neighboring town a year ago. She and Laura had never become the close friends they had been as children, but they had learned to be a family, a complicated one, but a real one. Emma Connor, the principal announced. Emma walked up to the stage to receive her diploma. She was a beautiful young woman with a confident gait and clear eyes. There was not a trace of the bitterness that might have remained after such a traumatic childhood. After the ceremony, the three of them, Laura, Emma, and Casey, went to a restaurant to celebrate. What should we toast to? Casey asked, raising her glass of lemonade. To the truth, Laura said, no matter how painful it may be. To family, Emma added. Real family. To second chances, Casey finished. They clinked glasses and drank. Around them, the familiar world of a small town bustled. The same people, the same conversations, the same life. But for them, everything had changed. They had lost a lot, years, illusions, innocence. But they had found something more valuable, the truth and the opportunity to build a future on an honest foundation. The price of loyalty had been high. But sometimes, only by paying it in full can you get what is truly important. The opportunity to love and be loved without lies and betrayal. The story ended. Life went on.